So chapter 11, Major N. This is another chapter where not a great deal of techniques are used for us to write down, but I'll include it here for the sake of a comprehensive collection of chapter notes. But there are whole sections where it is just literally relating dialogue between these two people. So there are a few things I'll point out, and unfortunately I was hoping it'd just be the first bit and we could sort of stop halfway through, but actually there are more bits at the end than there are at the beginning, so you'll have to just bear with it, I'm afraid, for this one. But there are a few things to mention, but I've tried to avoid saying things for the sake of it, because I think sometimes things are just coincidental, and where they're not Anna Funder's techniques, where it's Julia's narrative, it sort of is less significant, I think, because it's not Anna Funder crafting it for her reader. So let's have a look then at chapter 11. Let's go back to the audiobook.
Lipsy. Maims for the souls down the stairs. I feel the... Chapter 11. Major N. Then a card came in the letterbox. It seemed normal enough. A standard printed card, as if I had to report to the police to have my ID renewed. It had spaces in it for them to handwrite my name and the date and time of the appointment. She is not looking at me. She's hardly talking to me. Her eyes move around the room, although there's not much to see. Behind me, the hot water cistern over the sink with its little blue flame. To my left, the door to the hall. Candlelight catches her face, etches cheekbone and chin. She is remembering as I watch, summoning presences more real than mine. There are some...
Just that phrase, more real than mine, just questioning reality. I think that's an important theme that runs throughout this. Obviously, it's a motif throughout the whole book, because reality is what the Stasi are so good at distorting. And so here you've got her reality as opposed to Anna Funder's reality. So there's just that theme of reality and what's real and what's not.
Things. She stops. I don't think I'll be able to remember this. I haven't remembered this. I stick to small facts. Did you know what the card was about? I thought I had overstayed my visa in Hungary. Usually they would just restamp your ID at the border and let you back in. I started preparing excuses in my mind. At the same time, I said to myself, look, it can't be that bad. What can they do to me? I mean, I wasn't afraid they'd collect me in the night and lock me up and torture me. Julia analysed the situation from every angle. In its later stages, the regime stopped, for the most part, direct action, arrest, incarceration, torture, against its people. It opted instead for other ways of silencing them, methods that amnesty would find harder to chronicle. The typical thing that could happen to you in my day in the GDR, that your career was broken before it was begun, that had already happened to me. And now that I didn't even have the Italian boyfriend anymore, what else could they want? The police station had a vast waiting hall. People stood silently in 2 long queues curled around the room, each one joined to a counter. The lines hardly moved. I took a number, but then I realised I didn't know which queue was the right one, she says. So I went up to the policewoman who was overseeing things. She looked at my card and said straight away, "Ah, Miss Berent, you don't need to queue at all. You are to go directly to room 118. Julia laughs at herself. I was pleased at first. I thought I had got out of standing in line. Then she noticed that all the people in the queues were going into one of 2 rooms behind the counters, but neither of those was room 118. I had to go by myself up several flights of stairs and down a long corridor, left around a corner and then left again. There were no people around. I saw no one enter or leave any of the rooms I passed. Room 118 was way over on the other side of a building. She knocked. "Come in." There was a man alone behind a desk. The first thing she noticed was that he wore a Western suit and a good tie. He stood up straight away, a small nod, his feet clicking together. "Miss Berent, I am N, Major," he smiled. He smiled and extended his hand. And then, clear as a bell, "Ministry of State Security."
So here we have the person who is named after the title of the chapter, Major N. That simile there, clear as a bell, is quite interesting because, of course, the title is far more important than the individual, which is that idea of communism, that the state is greater than the individual. And so you've got this sort of anonymity in this Major N. And yet the title here, and we met it last chapter with the excessive title of, was it Erich Honecker? But how we've now got the title of Ministry of State Security, as clear as a bell. It's nice and clear, loud, but the name himself is sort of immaterial and not important because he's shrouded in secrecy.
She felt fear, she says, like a worm in my belly. The man was not yet 40, with a wide face and receding hair. He wore small, round eyeglasses. He had a glowing suntan. He was friendly. In fact, for GDR standards, exaggeratedly polite. "Please," he said, "do sit down." They sat. She thought it might still, perhaps, be about the overstayed visa. But N began. "Such an attractive, intelligent young woman as yourself, Miss Berendt. Perhaps you could explain to me why it is," he smiled, "that you are not working." This was it. Up until this moment, it could all have been a product of her imagination. The boarding school, the headmaster's visit, the constant street searches, the failed exam, the friend's warning, the cruising larder, the extraordinary unemployment.
The asyndetic list there, just re-emphasising, I think, to us how this isn't her imagination. This is clearly a catalogue of disturbing events, and that presented as a list in that way, an asyndetic list, just reinforces to us how troubled she's been as a younger person and how abhorrent the state have been to her.
She was in shock. She spoke slowly. "You must know why I have no job," she said. His voice was soft. He did not stop smiling. "How would I know that, Miss Berendt?" Her mind flew. She could see where this was going. She was going to be kicked out of the country. "I thought it was my last chance to stay home," she says. So she told him straight out, "Look, please, I don't want to go to the West, but I think you people are forcing me out." She realised she was imploring him. "I must work somewhere. I am, after all, unemployed." "But Miss Berendt," he said, "how can that be?" He laced his fingers together on the desk. "There is no unemployment in the German Democratic Republic."
This is an anaphoric reference back to the earlier chapter where the unemployment, or rather the employment office said exactly the same thing. But it's quite sinister, the use of imperatives there. There is no unemployment in the German Democratic Republic. Not particularly helpful for us because it's not Anna Funda. This is Julia's narrative at this point. But it's the imperative verbs there, I think, are quite startling and quite sinister. She could not answer. He reached across his desk to a pile of papers and pulled them to him. "First, I have some questions," he said, "about these letters." Julia looked at his hand and saw, under it, her own handwriting. She was confused. She looked closer. They were copies of her letters to the Italian boyfriend. Julia had imagined all along that her mail might be being read. Sometimes letters she received from overseas had been brutally torn and taped back together with a sticker, "Damaged in transit." It was ridiculous, really, she says, but like all the other things, she had never thought about it for long. Major N laid the first letter flat on the desk and smoothed it out with both hands. He cleared his throat. To Julia's horror, he started to read it aloud. "I think of the shame I would feel sitting opposite Major So-and-so in his office with these intimate things in his fingers. Shame at hearing your words turn into the universal banalities of love in his mouth." Julia and her boyfriend wrote to one another in English. Major N had underlined in each letter the words he had not been able to find in his German-English dictionary. "He sat there and he—" Julia stops and takes a sip of tea. So, bringing us back to the present again, reminding us that there's a difference between Julia's story and Anna's story. And so the cup of tea, the stopping for a sip of cup of tea, is back to the realism, back to the present. "It must be cold by now. It goes down the wrong way." She coughs and coughs, but puts her hand out to stop me helping. "And he asked me," she says in a choked voice, "what they meant." Just be aware there of the use of tense as well. There's so present tense verbs as opposed to Julia's past tense verbs of her narrative. So there's tense shifts here, which you'll have noticed to differentiate between Julia's past narrative and also the present tense of Anna's narrative.
The hairs on my forearms stand up. I've stopped looking at Julia now because in this dimness she ceased addressing her words to me some time ago. I am humbled for reasons I cannot at this moment unravel. I am outraged for her and vaguely guilty about my relative luck in life. Major N took his time perfecting his translation. The words that were not in the dictionary were, mostly, the words of their private lover's language. He asked her, "What is the meaning of this?" And again, "Would you mind, please, explaining this term?" One long forefinger on her handwriting or her lover's. "What about this?" he asked, touching the word kokorica in a letter from her boyfriend. Kokorica, Julia told him, is the Hungarian word for corn. What does this mean, then, Miss Berendt, when your friend writes, "I want my little kokorica"? She had to explain. On their holidays her hair had lightened to the colour of corn. Kokorica was his pet name for her. "Thank you, Miss Berendt." Then, in his western suit, with his foreign manners and his exaggerated courtesy, Major N proceeded through her relationship, one letter at a time. "It took quite a while," Julia says in a faraway voice. Her eyes are fixed in the middle distance. Major N was thorough. There was a pile of her letters to the Italian. There was a pile of his letters back to her. This man knew everything. He could see when she had had doubts. He could see by what sweet talking she had let herself be placated. He could see the Italian boyfriend's longing laid bare, and his invention, for his own pleasure, of his faraway girl. N insinuated he knew, as Julia surely also realised, that the Italian had an image of her that didn't quite hit the mark. He flattered her. "You are more complex, I think, Miss Berendt, and much more intelligent than he gives you credit for." When he was done reading, pointing, probing, he straightened the two piles of letters and put them back to the side of the desk.
That asyndetic list there of reading, pointing and probing is absolutely an asyndetic list, because you don't even get the connective between the last two words. It is truly asyndetic. Reading, pointing, probing, and it just shows the length and breadth of the firm, the Stasi's involvement and control of people's lives.
"Let us discuss your friend for a moment now," he said, "shall we?" He started to tell Julia about her boyfriend. "They weren't particularly spectacular things," she says, "but they were things I couldn't go to Italy and see for myself." Julia assumes that the Stasi had people in Italy. "He was even sort of witty about it, drawing me in, as if we could both have a chuckle about aspects of my boyfriend's life, as if we were both on the same side, and it was my friend, not I, who was the object of observation. As we know," N said, "our friend is in the computer business."
So that use of plural pronoun there of our friend is quite sinister, I think, at this point. So again, doesn't really help us, because I imagine when you're writing your comparative coursework that you won't be particularly looking at Julia's narrative, you're looking at Anna Funder's style, but there it is all the same, just a sinister language point, I think, from Major N, and the way in which he uses language to control and manipulate her by using that plural pronoun, our friend.
Julia nodded. "I'd never understood much about the sort of business he was in," she says, "and with my East German mindset, not at all. He had told me it was a trade in computer components." N specified it for her. "He is a sales manager for the regional branch of the firm." Then he described the boyfriend's family house in Umbria. He told her the make of car he drove. When he saw that this meant nothing to Julia, he interpreted it for her. In N's estimation, it was a middle-class sort of car, so there's no thinking he's rich or anything. Julia wondered where this was going. He opened his desk drawer and brought out a thick manila folder, which he put, closed, on the desk. "Now, Miss Berendt," he said, "we come to you." He evaluated her life in progress. "He knew everything about me," she says. "He knew all the subjects I'd taken and how I did in them. He knew all about each of my sisters, my parents. He knew my youngest sister wanted to study piano at the conservatory." Major N felt sufficiently informed to make some psychological assessments. He told her that there were clearly issues her father did not understand, that Dieter was problematic. Irene, by contrast, was much more loyal to the state. "It is clear to us on the evidence, Miss Berendt, that you take after your mother," he said, "which, if I may be so bold as to say so, is a good thing." "He was showing me that he had me in the palm of his hand," she says. Julia draws her knees up to her chest and places her heels on the seat. She stretches her jumper over the knees, making herself into a small black ball. "The only thing," she says, "it's ironic, but the only thing that they seemed not to know was that I'd broken up with my boyfriend." Since their split in Hungary, the Italian boyfriend had written several imploring letters. Julia had replied to the first one, but then stopped writing. "Or at least the Major acted as if he didn't know that we'd broken up," she says. "I thought it was strange that he didn't know. Maybe he'd been on holidays and had missed the last couple of letters. Or I think he might have known and thought his prospects with her then were better." N put the manila folder to one side next to the love letters. He joined the tips of his fingers together and leant forward. "As I'm sure you will have picked up, we are interested in your friend." And then it came. "We would propose," he said, "if you would assist us, that we meet every now and again for a chat." Julia says, "I thought it was absurd. I thought, what on earth could interest them in him?" She could not imagine that the Italian boyfriend was in any way a bigwig. He did not have any high-up connections he ever mentioned, or any special expertise or training at all. It did not occur to her until she got home that it could have been her they wanted. There was no question for Julia. She would not inform on him, or at all. "I am terribly sorry," she told Major N, "but I can't help you because we split up on this last trip to Hungary. I want nothing more to do with him. He wanted to own me. I knew if I stayed with him, I would not be able to determine my own life." She added, "I never want to see him again, even as a friend." N smiled. "If," he said, "after giving the matter some further thought, you reach a different decision, you should not hesitate to call at any time." He gave her his card with his phone number on it. "Oh, and, Miss Berendt," he said, "one more thing. You must not discuss our little talk with anyone. Not your parents, not your sisters, not your closest friends. If you do, we will know about it."
The use of anaphora there with not your parents, not your sisters, not your closest friends, it's really sinister, and it just reinforces that control that the Stasi had over people, very vulnerable people, and the use of imperatives as well. If you do, we will know about it. And then it continues, this afternoon has not occurred. You have never been into room 118. You are not to acknowledge me. You must walk on past. All these imperative verbs here just show the control and the dominance of the Stasi and the controlled state.
"This afternoon has not occurred. You have never been to room 118. If you see me on the street, you are not to acknowledge me. You must walk on past. All this for obvious reasons, as I'm sure you will have understood long ago." She nodded. And that was it. He had shown her that with one phone call to him, she could be in or she could be out. She could be with them or she could be gone. And then he let me leave. The street was another world, the daylight bright and unnatural.
Sorry, I missed the pause button there. Just going back up a little bit, the anaphora of she could be in, she could be out, she could be with them, or she could be gone. The anaphora there and that sort of parallelism of that phrase to show that really they controlled every aspect of her life, and they controlled which direction her life would take depending on her choices.
Julia watched a class of small children being herded along the pavement. She felt sundered, suddenly and irrevocably, from life. It was as though all at once I was on the other side, she says, separate from everybody. Julia seems to have run out of words, so I pick up the plates and place them behind me in the sink. I look in the fridge for something else to eat, as if it might yield possibilities missed at first glance. There's only a saggy old condom of liverwurst and an apple. I throw out the liverwurst and cut up the apple.
Okay, so certainly not like us to miss out on an opportunity here, but there's Anna Funder's, we're back to her narrative, aren't we? Back to her describing the present, and quite a grotesque metaphor, I guess, of this food being associated with bodily fluids. Again, this condom of liverwurst and an apple. It's quite a strong image. Only a saggy old condom of liverwurst and an apple. I throw out the liverwurst and cut up the apple. So she's taken something which is food and she's sort of made it quite grotesque and base and sexual and, bodily fluids. Classic funder. Classic funder. Look at that present tense as well. I throw out the liverwurst, so bringing us back to that present tense as opposed to the past tense of Julia's narrative.
Whilst I have my back to her, she starts to speak again. To listen to her is to witness the process, almost mechanical, of pulling things up from the past. Her voice is slow. I think I totally repressed that entire episode, she says. Maybe what came later, the whole 1989 story, was so severe that other things just fell away. Otherwise, I can't explain it. I don't know what she means by the whole 1989 story. I say I think it is extreme, what happened to her. Yes, it is, she says. When you become conscious of it. But the strange thing is, it's only now, in this room, that I feel the shudder run down my spine.
So, the 1989 story is an example of prolepsis, and I suspect, which is essentially foreshadowing, so prolepsis, Prolepsis, and I suspect that Anna Funder's doing this to create a narrative hook, really, to engage the reader, because ultimately this is a very readable and sort of progressive, in the sense that there is a narrative progression in this book. So I suspect that's why she's done that, and we get reference to that towards the end of the chapter.
At the time, I criticised other things, not being allowed to study or have a career, but looking back on it, it's the total surveillance that damaged me the worst. I know how far people will transgress over your boundaries until you have no private sphere left at all, and I think that is a terrible knowledge to have. She flicks her hair as if to get rid of something. At this distance, I understand for the first time how bad it was what he did in that room.
Now, and this is a very small point, but, it's not stopped us before, so I'll make another small point here. The word "that room," or how bad it was, what he did in that room, it's an example of deixis, or deixis, I'm not quite sure you pronounce it, D-E-I-X-I-S. So D-E-I-X-I-S, and I would link it to the word "that room," and it just simply means it's the use of a word, a pronoun, really, to refer to something that's already known. So we know which room. We know it's room 118, and so it's deixis because we can fill in the blanks. And I mean, it's something and nothing, really. I don't know what we do with it, but I guess it's sort of engaging the reader because the reader already knows which room it is. So we're sort of included to an extent, and that might be part of it. But it just, I think, it's a reference back to something that we already know. So deixis is the technique that's used there.
She takes a piece of apple and seesaws its fleshy arc between two fingers on the table. The empty fridge shudders and stops. The kitchen is a deeper quiet.
So, back to Funder again, we've got this figurative description. And it's actually quite a relief, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, but I found these chapters a bit dull because, yes, things are happening and there's some horrific things happening, but I quite like Anna Funder's, I don't like it calling it Anna Funder. Funder, I don't know why, but I quite like Funder's figurative style. And it's quite rich, and I suppose it has that style of fiction, which I quite like. Whereas I find the more factual bits from Julia to be a bit more, a bit more dull. But that's just my sort of bias, really. Anyway, there's personification here, isn't there? The empty fridge shudders and stops. The kitchen is a deeper quiet. So even the fridge is shuddering. So it's personifying the fridge there at that point to sort of almost suggest that even the fridge is repulsed by the actions of the state.
People talk about the unconscious, she says, and it becomes clear to me as I am telling you this, the effect this knowledge has had on my life. She takes a small bite of apple. I think I am definitely psychologically damaged. She laughs, but she means it. That's probably why I react so extremely to approaches from men and so on. I experience them as another possible invasion of my intimate sphere. She watches my face. I think it's worse if you repress it. To dig it up, or to leave it lie in the ground. When she left room 118, Julia was all right until she got home. Then her legs wouldn't hold her weight. She made it to the bathroom and vomited. When she came out, she noticed her voice trembled and she couldn't set it straight. She told her parents and her sisters everything. That evening the family sat down to decide what to do. My mother is a very pragmatic person, Julia says. Irene said, "Right, you ended it with the Italian. I didn't want to influence you, but I'm glad you didn't marry him. Now, though, you have to think very coolly about what you do next." Julia couldn't quite believe that this was happening, that they were sitting in the living room at home, talking about how she might live out the rest of her life. She was 20 years old. We'd always discussed me going to live with the Italian boyfriend, as if it were an option. But that was more like a teenage adventure fantasy, thinking I'm free to do that and no one can stop me. Suddenly, it was reality. I have to leave here forever. I have to leave my family. I will not see my sisters again, and I have to go to the West, which, as I said, I had never wanted to do. Julia has started to speak into the jumper wrapped over her knee. And I think, too, I was disappointed in the state. I realised for the first time that it wasn't really the good father state you have in the back of your mind. I saw it can be so dangerous, so very dangerous, without me having done anything at all. She would not become an informer. That left only one real option. "You'll have to find someone else to marry so you can get out," Irene said. "That's the only way." Then she voiced all of their doubts. "But do you really want to marry an old person?" she said. Dieter sat hunched in rage and sadness at the end of the table. No one spoke. "That's when I thought of it," Julia says. "I thought, if there's no way around it, we just have to crash through somehow." There was apparently this method called a Staatsratsbeschwerde, for people to write directly to Erich Honecker if they needed something they couldn't get, or to make a complaint. She shakes her head, as if the citizen really did have a voice and rights. People would write saying they wanted to buy tiles for their bathroom or machine parts for their tractor, and none had been available since August or whatever. Ordinary people would sometimes say, "Well, why don't you stop complaining and just write to Erich?" So I thought to myself, why don't we? I mean, if we examined it, what had happened was just not right. I see the mimic in her again. I don't even have this boyfriend anymore. I want to study and I want to stay in the GDR, and why not? We can just write to Erich and complain. She looks up at the ceiling. There was a certain naivety in this that I see today. Back then, we thought that the party and the state were one thing, and the Stasi another. She shakes her head and unravels herself from her jumper, placing both feet on the ground. She opens her hands wide. I thought, well, what can they do to me? Major N's card lay on the table between them all. "You have the phone number," Irene said. "Call him up tomorrow and tell him that you and your parents are going to write to Honecker and make a complaint." "I will never forget that night," Julia says. "I said to my parents, 'Right then, that's what we'll do,' and I went to bed. I had nightmares like I have never had before or since." Julia dreamt she was being pursued in a place where everything was familiar to her. The kitchen countertop, the view from her bedroom, the faces in a shop, the back of her sister's head, but no one recognised her and she was not at home. Her father started to die, wilting like a plant and calling for her, but he couldn't hear her responses, couldn't see where she was. When she woke, she didn't know if she dreamt of where she was or wherever it was she was going. The night was terrible, terrible. I don't remember if I cried. I don't think I did. I just sweated and sweated till the bed was wet. I woke up many times. It was truly terrifying what I lived through. She runs a hand through her hair. It was the loss of everything until I had disappeared too. The next morning, after everyone left, Julia picked up the card and took it to her grandmother's to make the call. She was alone in the house. She could smell disinfectant and boiled potatoes. She looked at the numbers in black on the card. They moved. She saw her hand was shaking and put the card down on the bench. In that moment, she could no longer string together the reasons why she was making this call, how it came to this.
Just a very quick point there. Interesting to notice that she includes the smell of disinfectant and boiled potatoes. This isn't even Anna Funder. This is Julia's narrative, of course. So how she knows that is anyone's guess, but something which we don't need to have included, but Funder has included that, which is just typical of her sort of obsession with the olfactory senses.
She was just here, now, with this card and this name and the numbers that would make him speak to her again. She put her fingers in the loops to dial. N picked up straight away. When he realised what she was saying, "You told others what we said? You are going to write what?" He was furious and demanded that Julia meet with him alone. She was to come to a covert apartment in town. "It was over, of all things, the travel agency," she says. She put her lips together with a grim smile. "Of course I'd gazed in that window many times. I knew exactly where it was." N told her there would be serious repercussions for her and possibly for her family from this breach of her undertaking of silence. He reminded her that her younger sister Catherine, was it not correct, dreamed of studying piano at the conservatory. He said he would contact his superior, the regional head, and see what action was to be taken from here. The family waited a week before a card came in the letterbox. They were to be visited at home. 2 of them came, N and his boss. "But it was not at all what we anticipated," Julia says. N looked completely different to me. He was sweating and uncomfortable. His boss didn't look much better. We didn't know what was going on. Dieter told them there was no reason. What reason could there be for all the things that had happened to their daughter? They had always been good citizens. Irene told them flatly that they were going to write to Honecker. The men held their hands up. There was no need to overreact here. Surely, they said, things had not gone so far that they couldn't be fixed locally. There was no need to get Berlin involved. This was a situation...
That use of synecdoche there to refer to Berlin, and I think in this case, it refers to the whole of government, not just the city, but the government itself. But I think that the men, N and his boss, are using synecdoche here to sort of soften the implications that they're referring to it as Berlin rather than the government, because the government sounds much more harsh, much more intimidating for them, presumably, than just Berlin, which is obviously a capital city. So use of synecdoche there, but for perhaps a different reason than we've met in the past.
They looked at Dieter and Irene, where the imagination of a young person, a good quality of course, might have come into play. Dieter and Irene and the girls were silent. Then the men asked to be given some time. "We couldn't figure it out at first," Julia says, "but when they left, we knew we'd won. We had never really known where the battle was," she smiles, "but we knew we'd won." Julia doesn't know why the Stasi was afraid of them complaining to Honecker. Possibly because both her parents were teachers and outwardly conformist, or because the Stasi had no legal basis for what it had done to her. Who knows? It is one of the very rare occasions when the bluff was called and someone won against the firm.
That euphemism again there to refer to the Stasi as the firm.
"The amazing thing was," Julia says, "the next week I was rung up about a job." She was taken on as a receptionist in a hotel. It looked like she would work there for her lifetime. But then came 1989.
Another time marker. So this is that anaphoric reference back to the earlier 1989 story that we mentioned was prolepsis. It's now become anaphoric reference linking back to that reference earlier on, so a time marker. And it gives us a narrative progression, a sense that her story is going somewhere, and it builds some tension because, of course, we want to know if that was so bad that everything else before it is sort of faded into insignificance. We want to know what the thing was that happened in 1989.
"That's a whole other story." She picks up her box of love letters. "It's late. I should go," she says. "I thought I'd come and get these." She pats the box. "And have a look at them. I'm seeing a psychotherapist and we've got up to my relationships with men. I'm trying to remember them. They seem like another life." She smiles and the light catches her teeth.
Back to descriptions of appearance again, and back to that very Funder-esque. Do I dare use that word? Will you accept that word? I think I will. Funder-esque description or figurative description of her appearance, the light catching her teeth. Again, not particularly flattering, possibly. In fact, it undermines the smile that she's just given. So she smiles, and then the light catches her teeth, which is, I don't know, not perhaps as positive and flattering as should have liked. So it's very typical of Funder's style.
"These letters from the Italian boyfriend will be an aid memoir to all that," she says. I look at the box in her arms and know that you cannot destroy your past, nor what it does to you. It's not ever really over. I see her out. In the hall, she clicks the bike pump onto the crossbar of her beat-up bicycle, and I open the door. As she goes down the stairs, I feel there is something missing here. She does not seem like a girl who called their bluff, worked in a hotel for 2 years and was then liberated into her future by the 1989 revolution. No one can tote up life's events and calculate the damages, a table of maims for the soul. But this is not the full sum of things, I think, as Julia rides back to her barricaded tower, full of things she can't leave, but can't look at either. Chapter 12.
The chapter ends there, doesn't it, with that narrative hook, full of things she can't leave but can't look at either. It's a real sense that we as the reader want to know what happened and what that story is. And so surely, we've sort of been left at a bit of a cliffhanger here. You can see where the chapter ends at this point, because the next thing to find out is about what did happen in 1989. And that's it for that chapter. See you the next one.